With a population of just over 80,000, DC's Ward 8 community sits in the southernmost tip of the city. It boasts some of the best scenic views of the district and has some of DC's largest green spaces. And if you want to see parts of DC's true history, Ward 8 has that too. Good evening and welcome to this WHUR WHUTV special edition of the Daily Drum. I'm Vermonte Bryant in for Harold Fisher. Tonight we go inside what's called DC's Forgotten Gem, Ward 8. It's an area rich with history like the Big Chair, Frederick Douglass's home, and St. Elizabeth's Hospital. And it's a community rising with new construction bursting from Good Hope Road to MLK Avenue. But with all that newness and revitalization, there are also concerns from longtime Ward 8 residents and businesses who say they don't want to become the latest victims of DC's gentrification. We have several guests to help us drill down on this conversation. Tonight's Daily Drum is being streamed on WHUR.com, Facebook, and YouTube. We are not taking any phone calls, but we invite you to join the discussion using the hashtag DCWard8. Let's introduce you to our panel. Denise Rolock Barnes is a longtime Ward 8 resident and business owner. She is the publisher and second-generation owner of the Washington Informer newspaper. Also in studio with us is Mustafa Abdul Salam. He is the facilitator of the Ward 8 Community Economic Development Planning process. We'll hear later in the hour from city lawmakers and officials, a longtime Ward 8 pastor, and from the widow of the late mayor for life, Marion Berry. Denise, we begin with you. As I mentioned, you are, and if I haven't, you are a native Washingtonian. You spent the better part of your life and your business in Ward 8. That's a rarity in the city now, filled with lots of newcomers. What's your view of Ward 8 now and the future, and your hopes for the future of Ward 8?
You know, thank you, Ramondi. First of all, thank you for having me on the show and to talk about my neighborhood. You know, my dad and stepmother, when they married, their first apartment was at Butler Gardens in Ward 8, and then they moved and purchased a house, on Foxhall Place, where they spent the bulk of their lives together until they both passed. And so as a child, you know, coming back and forth, my mom and I lived on the other side of town, and so, you know, I would come back and forth. And you know, I've always found Ward 8 to be a very strong, very connected community. And it's still that way. You know, you have folks who've been in community leadership positions for years. They learn to fight together as well as work together. And that's a positive that I've seen. Now, you know, Ward 8 has changed because now we have a new section that is west of the Anacostia River. So all of that development that we didn't include, you know, now includes areas that are brand new. You know, Nat Stadium and all of that.
The new soccer stadium.
The soccer stadium's not in Ward 8.
Not the soccer stadium.
Yeah,
with the basketball.
The baseball.
Just the baseball
stadium, right.
Right,
Mm-hmm.
and all of that Navy Yard area is now a part of Ward 8. So, you know, that's kind of a bright star. But then, as you mentioned, there are bright stars that are flashing right within the community. So, I mean, we have high hopes. I know when my stepmother, who served on the city council for Ward 8 for 16 years, one of the things that she spent many years on.
And your stepmom was Wilhelmina Rolark.
Thank you for making sure I said that. Yeah, Councilmember Wilhelmina Rolark, an attorney also. And, you know, one of her biggest, I guess, efforts was to get that grocery store, that giant food store. And she said, you know, I don't know if I'll ever live to see it, which she didn't. But trying to turn that old military facility into a grocery store, you know, took a lot of work and it was a long struggle to get that brought into the ward. So, you know, there's always been a vision for great things to happen in Ward 8. Everybody across the board has looked forward to it. But we know that for us, it's a long process. And so we keep planning, we keep hoping, and we keep working and striving to bring to the community the things that we think that we deserve.
Now, with all the great things about Ward 8, we have to recognize, Mustafa's challenges. Ward 8 has the highest poverty rate in the city, along with the largest unemployment rate. Home values are far less than the rest of D.C., and we have to sort of address that perception that Ward 8 is a dangerous place to live, work, and even play. Mustafa, you have a unique position as the facilitator of the Ward 8 Community Economic Development Planning process. Talk to us about your role and the work that you're doing to redefine, if that's the right word, Ward 8, yet keep its rich history and character that many of us know about.
Yeah, well, let me first say thank you for having me on here and being on with Denise and her sharing the history, because I think that's really important. I'm not a native Washingtonian. I'm from New Haven, Connecticut, but I see the same dynamics. I've been here for close to 20 years, and to come here was my choice. And I'd also want to thank the residents for their involvement with a planning process that is very unique in its nature. And it was a 3-year process of really listening to residents. What makes it unique is it was bottom up. The whole thing was driven by the community. And the results that we have a report that we're sharing. But what that report does, it creates a vision, a common vision for everybody that participated in the process. And there was a couple of thousand. Where we talking about similar things that we feel need to happen as a community. So hopefully through education, communication, this report will get out in a way, particularly to those who make the decisions, because what the report talks about is the need for decisions to be made at the community level. There's no history of effective decisions for the community happening at the top level. And so we can continue to do that, but we're going to get the same results. So what the community is saying, with all the monies that's being pumped into the community wants to have some influence on where that money goes and how it impacts the community, because the community is the best knower.
And that's always the key, right? Making sure the report is read, and then making sure that those who are on the ground level are a part of it. Now, it's no secret that when you seek change, it often has to come with sort of a delicate balance. D.C. officials and lawmakers know that story all too well. Trayon White is a native Washingtonian. He is also the Ward 8 council member.
The reality is most of D.C. has been built up significantly in the last 12 years. And with that comes the price of living has skyrocketed. And so we are a predominantly black community. You don't find it everywhere. DC is a very diverse city. But those who can't afford to live anywhere else has navigated east of Anacostia River, meaning Ward 7 and Ward 8. And with that, it comes with a lot of social issues, poverty, illiteracy rates, health disparities, you name it, we have it. And it's more concentrated even after COVID. And so we are in a place where we have to be intentional about helping residents grow their families, grow economically, support black and minority businesses, make sure we have strong education systems. And we're not there yet, and we cannot get there until we start admitting what our shortcomings is. You can't get to a solution without first acknowledging the problem. And so as the leader of this community, I've been steadfast on bills like displacement-free zones that's designed to freeze the taxes in and around areas hardest hit by development. I started the DREAM grant that's the poor government capital into minority businesses east of the Anacostia River.
And so it is worth mentioning that Trayon White is a mentee of the former Mayor Berry and holds the position that the former mayor held as a council member in D.C. Ward 8, and we'll get to a little bit more about the former mayor. But Denise, as a journalist and a resident, you hear and experience firsthand, right, sort of the greatness and the challenges of Ward 8. What do you think it will take to leverage a little what Mustafa was talking about, the community's assets, without pushing out those who've long waited to see Ward 8's full potential? Back to that balance, right?
Yeah, and I have to think back to, this doesn't answer your question, but, when we look at Berry Farms, Frederick Douglass dwellings, we look at all of the public housing facilities that where thousands of Ward 8 residents once lived, and have all been pushed out of the city, waiting for those facilities to be renovated and to provide affordable housing for people to come back. They have not come back. And so, we've seen how that change has not occurred. At the same time, there's a hope that we can bring more resources into the community. And Mustafa and I had a conversation earlier about nonprofits, right? And so, how that can or cannot really support a community. But it's, we have a population where I think the majority is under the age of 18.
We're the youngest population in the district.
So that means that we really need to focus on that population. I mean, from early childhood education to improving schools. I mean, I'm complaining, and I don't mean to be here to, just complain, but, you've got a brand new Ballou Senior High School. Soccer field never been used. Don't know if they can use that Olympic-sized swimming pool that they have on the inside. We're trying to find out. We're going to find out. But, I think this local government, a lot of resources have been poured into the community with respect to dollars and cents and buildings, but we need people. We need folks who want to come in and really actually, support programs, soccer coaches, swim coaches, whatever the resources are to come in and engage with those young people on a consistent basis. I grew up in recreation centers. That's where I spent my time when I wasn't in school or in a camp, in a recreation center. And so I think the council member has had good ideas about that. It's just bringing those ideas into fruition so that we have kids who are, understand the great graduates that have come out of Ballou High School. We'd be amazed to hear about some of those graduates, or even Anacostia for that matter. So, I mean, it's just, it's when we describe a community like we opened the show up with, and that's constantly what we're being told about who we are and the place that we live and the conditions that we live in. How do we change our mindset to think that, it's nothing wrong, with being in a community where you can have some control over, your resources. You don't have to be victims of what we are seeing in Ward 8. And we tend to be classified as victims of our situation as opposed to, folks who can really make a difference in our own lives.
Yeah. And just to pick up, historically, a place like Ward 8, the way you got resources is to talk about your deficits. The poorer you were, the more money you got. Mm-hmm. That's the way the game was played. So we've had this deficit poverty concept for almost 3 or 4 decades. The broader community is pure capitalist, wealth building, making a profit. So the disadvantage, and this is why we see such a great gap between black people's wealth and the white people's wealth. So the challenge that we have now, and it's a challenge, is to focus on wealth building as our pure strategy, because the only way you can remove poverty is wealth. And we have the resources to do it, we just don't have the focus.
Well, we're going to take a break in just a minute, but first we had a chance to sit down with Cora Masters Berry, the widow of the man affectionately called D.C.'s mayor for life. The late Marion Berry was also the council member for Ward 8, as I mentioned earlier. Mrs. Berry still lives in the ward and runs the Southeast Tennis and Learning Center, a nonprofit changing the lives of youth. We asked Mrs. Berry about the future of Ward 8.
Well, gentrification means different things to different people. In Ward 8, as a person who's been at the center since 2001, I've seen different ethnic groups flow through here, economic groups. The influx of new people to Ward 8 tend to lean more toward what I would say middle-class black families, taking the opportunity at the last opportunity to purchase land in the District of Columbia. In the Anacostia area, there are people who are coming in, which the people in the area of the native Washingtonians, or at least the ones from Ward 8, are calling gentrifiers, and they're usually the people who don't look like us or people who have a different ideology in terms of, community. So I think at the end of the day, you can never stop change. I think what you can do is manage the impact. And I also think change is not bad, it's good. It just depends on how you use it. And with my center here at the Southeast Tennis and Learning Center, a lot of the children who have been coming here come out of situations, communities, environments, and families that have a lot of economic and social challenges. And this center has been like a safe haven and a transformational building and programs. At the same time, it doesn't hurt to have people come in who are, the children are a little bit more advanced, they have a little bit more exposure, and to mix them together is a good, I think, inclusion of culture. So I don't see it as bad at all.
Now, Denise and Mustafa, Mrs. Berry talked about sort of the mix, right? But she also talked about gentrification, and that's a big topic of conversation, not only in the district and especially in Ward 8, but throughout the district, but throughout the country. You talk a lot of big cities that many have seen as urban, which usually meant people of color, is changing, and we see that here in the district. Denise, what's your sense of gentrification? Good thing, bad thing, somewhere in the middle, unavoidable?
I think it's unavoidable, but I don't also look at gentrification as a racial issue. When I look at the folks that I see moving into Ward 8, and I think Mrs. Berry talked about that a lot of them are middle-class black folks, young black folks. I mean, there are 3 houses on our block that have been bought by young black folks, and they were owned in families for generations.
So is gentrification, especially if we're just talking about the district, sometimes misinterpreted, that most folks see it as, okay, Chocolate City is turning mocha and it's even getting lighter. So many folks think when they hear gentrification in the district, okay, black people are being displaced as white folks move in. And you're saying that's not really always the case in general.
Well, I think what I've seen in Ward 8, while I think there is racial gentrification, I've seen that. I've seen white folks that have moved into neighborhoods, particularly, the housing prices are not cheap in Ward 8, especially down in historic Anacostia. You're talking about, $800,000, $900,000 homes down there. But in areas like where I am, Congress Heights, Washington Highlands, Bellevue, there are a lot of, I think, younger families or single black folks, who are not afraid of the labels that you use to characterize Ward 8. They're not afraid of those labels. They may be the pioneers, I don't know, but they're coming in and saying, this is affordable. I want to live here. And we don't see them a lot, Mustafa. We really don't. At community meetings, they're not necessarily all engaged like the historic residents are, but they're there. Yeah. And we don't talk about them either, but they're there.
Are those labels, and I'm assuming what you meant sort of maybe the negative labels,
exactly.
Do you think they're unfair to be used? Are they accurate? Are they off? What's your sense of those labels that get used, or the ones that I even presented?
I do take it personally. I grew
it's
up.
Okay.
Well, as a kid.
Let me say, for a couple of years I lived in Congress Heights, so
All right,
but I was a little tiny thing though. But moved out into the county, so I'll say
as
that.
a kid growing up and going to Calvin Coolidge High School or Rabeau Junior High, and I'd spend the summers with my folks, and my friends' parents would not let them come and visit me because of labels like that. No, you can't go to Southeast. She can come over here, but you cannot go visit her. And so, I think that there are folks who come from communities like this all across the country. They grew up in communities, and they have a sense now of how to not be deterred by labels. And I'm seeing a lot of millennials, that 30, 40 age group now, where they're really wanting to settle in and own property, and they don't want to leave the city, and they're looking at Ward 8 because they believe that there's opportunity for growth and development. They see the future that we hope will come in their lifetime.
And that's what I was going to ask you, Mustafa. Do you believe now this new generation, those labels are old? What they see is opportunity. They see a ward that sits up high on this hill that you can look back across to the Capitol and all the monuments. They see something different than maybe an older generation.
And the green space.
And the green spaces.
Let me just say, we're in a cycle because what we call gentrification was urban renewal 60 years ago. They just put another name on it. And the phenomena is when they want to take back the land, call it what you want, but that's what it is, because Ward 8 is a tremendous asset in the region. It's one of the most valuable assets in the region right now. In the landmass. So, yeah, people are coming to it because between Homeland Security and just other amendments, it's the place that you want to be part of, because the next 5, 10, 20 years, it's going to be large.
But how do you make sure, Mustafa, that those, for lack of a better term, old heads, those residents who've been there forever, right, can then take part in this revitalization? Because as property values go up, right, your taxes go up. And for many folks, once you have to pay those property taxes, it's difficult. So again, I think the key word often here that is balance, right? How do you balance
it's
that?
not balance, it's power. And when you don't have any power, then you're subject to somebody else deciding what they want to do for you. So one of the, I think the most major part of this report is we talk about the creation of a membership association for black people that live in underserved communities. Just like AARP has done for seniors, where in the course of 50 years, they went from being the least respected people to now every politician wants to talk to seniors, because they're an organized body and they have a common agenda, and politicians have to respect that. We can do the same thing as residents living in Ward 8, Ward 7, Ward 5, if we organize and come up with a common voice, because a lot of the issues we're dealing with the same. So it's really how much we're willing to organize. And we're creating a concept called Digital Collective. There's a membership association that focuses on communications and really making sure that we're not duplicating and fragmenting our system and how we work with poor people. Because the challenge is, how do we pick everybody up, particularly those that have the least?
Denise, you had mentioned your stepmom, Wilhelmina Rolark, who was a council member. We didn't mention your dad, Calvin Rolark, who started the Informer newspaper, who has passed on since, and you've taken over for him. Your dad was intimately involved in the city, in politics, in community activism. What was his sense of where Ward 8 sat and where it should be, and how the city leaders were addressing Ward 8? And I mean, we can go all the way back to Mayor Washington, and probably even before that, I think your dad was here. What was his sense of Ward 8 and its potential? Did he talk about it?
Oh, yeah.
Often?
I mean, I think he always saw the potential in Ward 8. That's why he decided, even with, not that they became, rich or anything, they didn't, but they were going to maintain that little house that they had on Foxhall Place. It was a great community. And I think that's what they saw in Ward 8. I mean, we had a guy that used to write for the Washington Informer named Fab Fisher, and anybody that knows D.C. for a long time would know Fab. And Fab used to talk about the stories of how black folks moved from, talking about urban removal, really is what it was.
Negro removal.
They moved them from Georgetown to Foggy Bottom to Southwest, and then east of the river. And those are families.
Yeah.
They weren't just individuals. These were families that moved. And so Ward 8 had a very strong family base. And people, the elders in the community, were actively involved in the community. There were lots of programs, for community members. So we have I think they saw the strength in the unity, even though they fought. That was an interesting thing. They fought each other, but their goals were the same. And so I think he had great hopes. It was just frustrating to see how slow decisions were made and how slow resources were coming, and then the constant reports to show how this community was impacted by legislation that just didn't seem, or dollars that didn't flow to the community. So they needed an advocate. People were involved with that. And so, and one other thing I was going to say, though, is when you talk about power, if you own a home, you got power.
Economic power.
And so economic power. So what we are having to see now is just that generational wealth dissolving.
So, Mustafa, when we talk about sort of, the changes and power, right?
Yeah.
And Denise says part of power is home ownership.
Right.
Economic development that you work with, how do you then create that if you have folks who are willing to come from the outside who may not be longtime residents of Ward 8, who can buy up those homes, and those who are renting then want to become homeowners? I would think that's the challenge of what Denise is saying also, to create sort of that lineage.
Well, it is a challenge because we spent so many years undeveloping people.
What do you mean by that?
Well, through education, miseducation, lack of communications, we have a population in most inner city communities, and Ward 8 mirrors it, that have been left behind. Don't have the skill sets, don't have the aptitude, really, to have the place in a high-tech society that we now move towards. So the question is, as a community, do we accept that? And I think we can't, because that's throwing away human beings. I think we got to do everything as a community to give people opportunity to catch up, because this is the best climate in the world for success. But if you lack the skills to really compete, then you're already at the disadvantage. And after 60 years of denying us the resources, capital, access to information, this is where we're at. So we got to accelerate our growth. And Ward 8, I believe, is in the best place in the world as a community of black people to create that model.
Denise, do you see city leaders right now putting a focus on Ward 8, or is it just one of the wards in the city? Do you see any sort of specific attention that's being put on Ward 8 in terms of city officials?
I think in words, yes. Now we have to make sure that we keep them accountable and make sure that what they say, they do. We had a council member, I think Nadeau, who was in the community just last week, looking for at a forum on violence. We told the mayor in one of her state of the district addresses, I think a couple of years ago, explained to the folks of the city that we're going to have to put money where the greatest need is, right? And if your community is doing well, wouldn't you want us to see us address the needs of people in other parts of the city, right? I mean, the more right she got, the quieter it got. But in essence, she was saying, we're going to put resources in this community that's been denied. And I think there are other council members who agree that there needs to be more investment in that community, but there's words and then there's actions.
All right, well, we're going to take a quick break, station break, and say goodbye to our 96.3 WHUR audience. But this conversation continues online and on SiriusXM channel 141 HUR Voices, 96.3 HD2 and 98.3 FM. This is The Daily Drum, DC's Forgotten Gem, Ward 8 Rising. We'll continue in just a few seconds. We'll be right back.
Are you looking for the latest information and stories that's happening around the DMV? Then you need to follow us online through our social media platforms. WHUR and WHUT, we're better together.
Thanks for staying with us for this WHUR WHUT special edition of The Daily Drum. I'm Bramante Bryant in for Harold Fisher. Our conversation resumes on DC's Forgotten Gem, Ward 8 Rising. Just a reminder, tonight's Daily Drum is being streamed on WHUR.com, Facebook, and YouTube. We are not taking phone calls, but you can join the conversation online using the hashtag DC Ward 8. Well, performing schools, maintained homes, places to shop, and the feel of safety often sum up the measure of any great community. Is that a tall order for Ward 8, or is it a reality already taking shape? Joining us for that part of the conversation is Amanda Stevenson, owner of the Fresh Food Factory Market in Ward 8, and Mustafa Abdul Salam, staying with us, the facilitator of the Ward 8 Community Economic Development Planning Process. Amanda, we are going to begin with you. You are helping to address the food desert that is very much apparent in Ward 8, a very critical issue as Ward 8 and as a business owner. Which statement is true to you? Ward 8, a forgotten gem, or Ward 8 rising?
I think it's both and, or yes and, but both. It is forgotten as it relates to access and opportunity. It is a gem and it is rising. There's a lot of people who are resilient, a lot of people who've bought back into Ward 8, like was shared earlier. A lot of us want to see us prosper. We have to be the change that we want to see. So it is a revival happening. You know, a lot of people are tired of the moniker and the misnomers and all that's said about us, you know, to see it, say it, do it. So we live a self-fulfilling prophecy of what labels were put upon the ward. But a lot of people understand, and a lot of people say that they're woke and they're waking up and they're seeing, hey, I need to actually show residents something different, because people need to see the change. They need to feel it. But we don't want those people who've been told and weren't privy to access and opportunity. We don't want that to be their legacy, all that they know. So now we are trying to make sure that we have change immediately. We're not waiting for someone to come in. We have to actually create it now. If nobody has done it for us, nobody planned to do it, we need to actually make sure that those measures take place now.
Is the fresh food factory market that change? And is change the right way to see it? Because, you know, we may think, oh, fresh food, yeah, that's changing. And should it have to even be a change? Should it be like just a staple, a reality that you see always?
It should have been. It should have been a staple. Food is. But healthy food is not only nutrition, it's medicine. And also food is economics, is multi-solving. I found that to be a better way to help heal the community, not just health-wise, but economic-wise. It touches on wealth as well. So we want people to have a better diet and people to understand that this is for them. We've done a host of demonstrations. We do certification training. We do a lot to make sure people know that this healthy lifestyle, holistic lifestyle is for them. It's by them. I understand. I relate. My father was a blind black farmer in rural Virginia, and he was diagnosed with cancer at my early age of 10. But they gave him 6 months to a year to live. He had that terminal prognosis, but he surpassed that by 18 years. But it was first his mentality, his spirit to say, like, look, listen, you know, that's between me and my maker. So now when people are going through cancers or whatever, they tell them you have to kind of think differently. And our community has to think differently. We can overcome. We could see, yeah, you know, they did say this about us, but we don't have to subscribe to that. So he was my example. Plus, we had to then cook for him. We had to help him do things differently. I grew up on an animal farm, so we had to put in some vegetation.
And now you're from a small town in Virginia, right?
Small town
so
in
folks,
rural Virginia.
Not that they don't have animal farms in the district, but we just want to make sure that folks know where Amanda is from. Tell us your town. I know you said it's small, but somebody out there else is from your town.
Yes, Surrey, Virginia, great town. Something's in the water because we're making strides. I think it's been on Bravo. I think somebody who hailed from Surrey.
You didn't even tell me that.
You know, like putting it on the map. But a lot of people are actually doing it. Great things from Surrey,
and
Virginia.
You're bringing that attitude, which I think is so important.
Yes.
And those experiences to an area, a city,
Yes.
a Ward 8, about this fresh food and the importance of that. I want to get back to that. But Mustafa, I want to sort of pivot off of what Amanda is talking about. Here is economic development right in front of us. Is this what not only Ward 8, obviously, but any city, but when you're talking specifically about a ward that has been underserved in many areas, and now we're talking about bringing a fresh food market. Is this what you want to see when you're talking about economic development and putting plans in place?
You know, it's what we want to see because Amanda represents that value that we have in the community. You know, that entrepreneurial spirit that says, you know, I'm going to be here, I'm going to do this, I'm going to make it happen. Listen, the community knows we got to do something different. What came out the report, and again, I encourage everybody to read this report, they recommend, the community, that we rebrand east of the river as Little Africa because we want to create the same type of ethnic reality that other communities do, like Chinatown and, you know, little Chinatown, little
Okay, now
Cabana.
I'm going to hold you. Don't lose your thought. With some folks go, Little Africa.
Right.
Come
right.
on, Mustafa. Do we want to go there,
Listen,
Little Africa?
right
is that
now,
too much?
Right now, Ward 8
I'm not saying it is.
Ward 8
I'm being a
is close to
contrarian.
90% African American.
Okay.
That's what it is. You know, and we're at a point in our understanding is that we need to be Little Africa. Because Little Africa is the place you want to be.
Right.
And if we're Little Africa, then if you can't get to Africa, you can come here.
Yes.
You know, that's our ethnic right. And so we got to, that's value.
Claim it.
That's value. That's right. If we don't claim it, then we don't deserve it.
Yep.
So that's where we're at now. And that by itself changes the game. You know, we're telling people when you come to D.C., we want you to come east of the river because you can get the experience of what it is to be African American in this country in ways that nobody else can do for you.
Amanda, in recent years, Ward 8 has seen new homes going up, right? Government departments relocating to the area, new restaurants, new stores, all good signs, yet the city is seeing a spike in crime and violence. We have to address that, much driven by youth and young adults. In your experience of what you've seen as a business owner, as the community is trying to move forward, it's a difficult scene when we're talking about violence, and especially when you're talking about youth and crime. What do you see? What have you seen from that aspect and what the city is trying to do? Or if someone came to you and said, Amanda, how do we sort of rectify this issue with the youth and sort of to decrease the crime in the ward specifically? And that's a tough question, I know.
Yeah, I was going to say it's very layered. You know, we will have to kind of like peel back what needs to be done. I don't think, making these people out as criminals or locking them up is the solution. I think it's rooted in generations of inequities or not having access to opportunities, the built environment. There's a direct relation between your diet and your actions. There's something called the food mood complex. So we can't just blame all of this on the person. We could say, what do they ingest? We could say, what are they breathing in? A lot of these things, it impacts your mental health that you're consuming and digesting. Where is the activity? Where is the support? Where are the jobs? Where is the income? What is all of this? This is a part of the dynamic that makes a community whole and healthy, that we need to have healthy discussions around, but there are a lot of different things that we could actually do. We make it an effort to hire first from the community. We do a lot of trainings. We work with Department of Employment Services, Department of Human Services, or whomever, however, because we do understand, we may perish from a lack of knowledge. We may perish from a lack of access. So we're doing everything that we can to right-size that through food. Again, food is multi-solvent. It is economic. So how do we give people jobs, right? How do we use our food hub and incubator to make sure that people could use food as income to help their families? If we're doing that, create more jobs, leveling the playing field, there's less activity that people are going to have in the negative light. So there are a lot of different things that we could do to heal our community.
Mustafa, I'll present the same question to you. Do I need to go over it again? I know it's kind of a long question.
Listen,
your sense.
We have focused on the ecology of being child-centered, community-based, and putting the emphasis on the wellness of children. If you're going to measure a society, a community, you measure by your children. Because if they're not healthy, no matter what you do, you don't have a healthy community. A lot of what we see in the streets, particularly with young adults or older youth, is a product of we neglected them for the last 20 years. We have not done anything for young people. We have not given any hope. And so if we want to reverse that, we as adults at all levels need to take youth development as a top priority.
And now the counter to that, Mustafa, some would say that's great, but we also have to have consequences for the things that these youth do.
Well, make it fair and equitable. Mm-hmm. Make it fair and equitable. Don't make the difference by income, because there's a lot of young people that get in trouble that we'll never hear about it because they have income. Right. So if you're going to treat them like that, treat our kids like that.
Well, the Reverend Willie Wilson has been a mainstay in Ward 8 for 4 decades. He is the pastor emeritus of Union Temple Baptist Church. Now, he is very concerned, but not surprised about the transformation of Ward 8. He says he's been sounding the alarm about gentrification in the ward for 30 years, and now it is here.
I have taught and told people for the last 30 years what was coming, because this is a repeat of what happened in Georgetown, what happened in Southwest, and now in Anacostia. It was planned. It didn't just happen. It was planned 30, 40 years ago. The moment that whites moved out of this city, that was the intent to come back into this city. And there were those who raised that as an issue. Thomas Owens, who was the president of the Commission on Housing, also the president of the largest savings and loan at that time, perpetual savings and loan, essentially said there were too many poor people in this city, code word for black people, and we need to make more housing available in Maryland so that more affluent people can come into the city. That was about 40 years ago, 1970s that was. I raised contention as to the racist nature of that statement, along with Marion Barry and Nadine Winter, both of whom were on the city council, and Julius Hobson. They tried to back it down, but it was clear what the plan was. Reverend Doug Moore talked about the plan back in those days, and they accused him of being mentally disturbed. But now we see the realities of exactly what he said when he said there is a plan to remove black people from this city so that whites could return. That has happened. It has happened in Anacostia. Not too much can be done now. Essentially, the way that it is done, as it is done historically, not only in Washington, D.C., but across the nation, is by building throughways right through the heart of black communities, raising the taxes. Then as new residents come in and rehab properties, the tax base rises and people are no longer able to afford homes that they afforded 10 years previous or so, and are forced to move out of the city.
A straight no chaser from Reverend Wilson. Mustafa, what are your thoughts about what the Reverend had to say?
Right on target. I mean, he has the history. Man, he was here. He's seen it all, and that's one of the, I think, the advantages of having some maturity. You see cycles, brother, so you know what has been played out because you've seen it before. And I think it speaks to how we have to do more intergenerational activity. You know, we as elders have to make sure that we're passing our information back so that they don't have to duplicate or make the same mistakes. You know, we can't afford that. You know, at the same time, young people have to respect, wisdom and maturity and be willing to listen instead of, not giving that respect. So, but that's our work. You know, nobody can do that for us, and it also speaks to we got to move away from trauma. You know, you really can't get to economic development until you deal with trauma. We've been traumatized for 400 years. You know, we got to get to a place where, we're never going to lose the trauma, but we can do better than what we're doing now. And we're not going to get it outside the community. It's got to be done inside the community.
Amanda, when you hear what Reverend Wilson has to say, and how long have you been a resident of the city, Amanda?
20 years.
20 years. So you've been here 2 decades. So you've seen these changes coming. What are your thoughts when you hear that?
I think that was kind of loaded for me. The first thing I think, like he's saying, is here, and then someone who made an effort to say, hey, this is coming, they made him out to be crazy. I think that's just something that we've seen, like a lot of our leaders or people who spoke out, they're deemed as crazy or something. So that's one thing that actually stood out to me. Secondly, again, he's a pioneer. He was in the community. He's actually seen the change, and what I wanted to do is I saw what my father had gone through, and I wanted to make sure community didn't have to kind of like live with these diseases, food-related diseases that they've had. You can overcome some cancers. You can overcome a lot of different trauma. You can overcome a lot of these different things, but you need to have that mindset. You need to want to actually do it, and you need to have the resources, someone to, give you what you need to make sure that that becomes a reality. And I think that we are at that brink. We are at that point where change is inevitable, right? But who's going to be here? Who's going to stay here? And we all need to make sure that we are exercising our right to be here. And I think, money has been placed in a lot of places, but we need to make sure that they are really put in the community and for the community to survive long term. Not just survive, I changed that to actually thrive and prosper long term.
And for you, Amanda, how do you keep your small business thriving and not sort of get pushed out by those bigger businesses coming in?
Changing is happening all around me. So when we came in 2019, I've been doing this work for a while with Sibley Memorial Hospital, working on economic development with AEDC, Small Business Development Center Network, what have you. But just my business specifically in 2019, we were making, thousands of dollars in our smaller footprint, just sales from the store to COVID happening, right? So we felt that, and I'm in a non-essential business, so I had to actually close my doors, and we had to take another look. What can we do now that everything is digital? I have to make sure that I have my operations set up where I could do a lot of training.
I did want to ask you, you mentioned grants, Amanda. Are you getting any kind of government assurances or any assistance in any way from the government?
I would say yes. We are, and we're working on some, so I'm just waiting for
That's all right. Put them up there, right?
Outcome, right? So we are. We've been a benefactor of the Food Access Fund, and we're opening another location in Ward 7, and we're going to be opening more in Ward 8. So these are conversations and grants that we're writing to actually garner support with WAKIF, with LISC, with the Capital Impact Partners, a few others, and United Healthcare, because food and nutrition is a part of healthcare, connecting health and housing. I've been big in working with Sibley Memorial Hospital and addressing that. But there are so many things that we are looking at as far as tapping into grants. So by force or by choice, I had to become a grant writer and write the vision, make it plain so people could then support it, so then I can better serve community.
And that's a whole nother conversation we can have also too about grant writing and funds being out there and knowing how to write grants.
Yes.
And if you don't know how to write it, who to go to
Yes.
To be able to write one of those grants. Now, we put sort of a similar question that I addressed to Amanda about growing and retaining businesses in Ward 8 to the person charged with making that happen. Christy Whitfield is director of the D.C. Department of Small and Local Development.
The challenge is always making sure that we are holding land and holding ground, literally and figuratively, for the people who have been there. There's always this sense that progress can be in the eye of the beholder, and I think that really maintaining connections within the community to make sure that progress is seen, maybe not equally by everyone, but that there is a place for everyone in progress. The challenge for a small business in Ward 8 is the same as everywhere else, but a little more amplified. Access to capital, access to opportunity, a fair shot at getting your brand out in front of people. I think that there are problems that entrepreneurs face no matter what. And as the markets are evolving in this post-COVID era, figuring out what is the nature of commerce for these businesses.
So let's pivot for a little bit, Mustafa and Amanda, a little bit off of business to schools, specifically in Ward 8. We know new businesses are more inclined to come to neighborhoods when schools are thriving, right? And as we see this economic boom happening in Ward 8, I think the question, is that producing better schools? Can you quantify or qualify that at all?
Well, I have been able to work very closely with one of our key partners, the University of the District of Columbia, under the leadership of President Mason. They have a program at Anacostia High School that is STEM related. They realize that unless they work with students very early, before they even get to high school, they don't have a pipeline of students coming out of high school to go to UDC to deal with STEM. There's many reasons for it. Some are, generational, systemic in nature. Some is that the education does not really work for certain young people. We got to be more creative and innovative. And even their parents, because a lot of them weren't educated. So it's a complicated challenge, but UDC is working with Anacostia High School, and I believe they're creating a very good model. And they're part of the plan, the report that we put out. And again, I encourage people to look at the report because no one system can do this by themselves. Education, workforce development, housing, youth development, all they have to work together. If we keep them apart, then none of them can work that effectively.
Yes.
And Amanda, obviously you're a business owner, and business and schooling and education are tied together. What's your sense of where we are right now with Ward 8 in the education of the young folks in the ward?
I was actually shocked to see like 2% of Ward 8 had master's degrees. Or maybe that was just the people reported, but it's sad because people actually look at those numbers and that dictates if they're going to come to a ward to actually better serve it or not. So we don't have the community's amenities because they just feel as though they're coming to a population that won't benefit or may not understand. But I think that we are changing that narrative about us, and we are more educated, and we want more than what has been labeled that we want. I heard that communities just want chicken and collard greens, so they may not support your health food markets. You selling ethnic foods, oh, this is not going to work here.
And what? Tell me what the reception has been to the foods.
Overwhelming. And I think, from the city and from the community, people actually tasting foods and understanding the benefits and, taking people out of the area and letting them see different things. That's what we've been about. Back in the day, coming here, we took youth over to Nigeria to actually let them see the culture, the food, the this, the that, and the other. And that, has actually still, been instilled in me, and different things like that we like to do as it relates to education. Because sometimes it starts with exposure. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it starts with, a lot of parents are looking at homeschooling, as a better solution because they're tired of money not being put into communities east of the river. Where is our, second language? What about our language immersion programs? Where are they east of the river? Maybe in a private school or maybe in another school, but not in public schools. Why not? Why haven't we had this? I wanted to get my sons in, Yu Ying, to actually learn Mandarin. But where is that? I've been talking about a lot of this stuff for a while, and I'm like, look, let me just again, be the change that I want to see. But a lot of parents, we get together, we talk about things, and we're making these implements to actually change our family dynamics because we're tired of the disinvestment in the area and choosing entertainment over education and other things like that. But yes, businesses come when, the school system is actually thriving. So no matter which goes first, I think people are just saying, hey, we're just tired of waiting for this change to actually happen. And United Healthcare is a partner of ours, and we are working with them to make sure that we have that pipeline to prosperity, and we are making sure that people could get certifications at a younger age. So we're going to be working with 25 plus youth at the end of this month to make sure that we are touching high schoolers and making sure that they get certifications and trainings and a great introduction into nutrition, food, and healthcare.
Mayor Muriel Bowser, Metro, Amazon recently joined forces to rehab an apartment community on Alabama Avenue in Southeast. The project promises a mix of revitalized and new housing, along with retail spaces, while making sure there are homes that are set aside for low and moderate income families. Your thoughts on initiatives like that, Mustafa?
Those are a very important initiative because they create the physical environment that people want to be connected to. But if you don't invest in the human capital, if you don't do the things that make human beings, feel good about themselves, feel connected, then no matter how much money you put out there, you failed. And so the community realized that we can't continue to wait on people making those kind of decisions. We know the solutions. We just don't have the money. So this is the challenge, and this membership association can grow to be the vehicle that can help us make sure that we get the money.
Just got about a minute left, Amanda. Your thoughts on that? And also, the mayor announced a plan about pledging to increase black home ownership, estate planning, pledge to across all 8 wards by 20,000 in terms of black home ownership. In the minute that we have left, is that what is needed? Really educating also from that standpoint.
I think, yes, great. I think she's going after the title Mayor for Life. I hear her, I see you, Mayor, and I respect it. But I think, it takes initiative and bold statements like that to make sure we're putting a strong emphasis on ownership. So it's going to take the education. It's going to take the capital. It's going to take the people in the community who know how. A lot of people have been on the pathway and been pushing ownership as a way to sustain, as a way to have some control and some say-so, some power, right? So there's a lot of us in the community who are doing those things, and the mayor, knowing our leadership, knowing that we're bringing in other investment in the community to make that come into fruition, that's the kind of activity that it needs to have happened many years ago, but glad to see it happening now. And I just thank her and just other administrators, other people in leadership, other parents, other Mustafas in the community, Mustafa and everybody to do it.
All right, well, we thank you all so much. Great conversation. Amanda, Mustafa, Denise Rolock-Barnes was with us, and all those who were able to join us by video. We thank you so much for this conversation. Well, after a gemstone is sawed and ground to sort of the desired shape, they say, and sanded to remove the rough marks left by sort of coarser grits, it's then usually polished to a mirror-like finish to add light reflection from the surface of the stone. I would kind of say that's what Ward 8 is. Like a gemstone, the ward, it has its coarser rough spots, but there's a polish that can help smooth that out. Economic development, affordable housing, job opportunities. That's the kind of continued polishing that can bring light to Ward 8 and all that it can be. That gem is on a hill, shining, sparkling, and bright. It's there. I can see it. Can you? Thanks for joining us for this WHUR WHUT's TV special edition of The Daily Drum. I'm Bramante Bryant. Have a great night.
This program was produced by WHUT and made possible by contributions from viewers like you. For more information on this program or any other program, please visit our website at WHUT.org. Thank you.